There we go. Okay, welcome to the New Knowledge Exchange webinar series. My name is Michael Guerin, and I am today's host. I'm very excited to introduce today's guest speaker, Jenny Kafka. Jenny's professional career includes time as a teaching assistant at Rutgers University, where she was the TA to yours truly, a weather analyst and research meteorologist at RiskPulse, and currently as the director of weather analytics at the Demex Group. In today's webinar, our focus will be on Jenny's career and how she got to be the success she is today. In terms of format, we'll ask that all of our audience members remain on mute, but we encourage you to submit questions via the Zoom chat if you have any, and we will try to get to as many of your questions as we can at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, Jenny, why don't you give us some background about yourself?
Great. Yeah, thank you for having me. As you mentioned, my name is Jenny Kafka. I have a PhD in atmospheric science from Rutgers University, where I was your TA many, many moons ago, it feels like at this point. For the last 2.5 years since I got my degree, I've been working in the private sector, thoroughly enjoying it as someone who just gets to spend all day coding and analyzing climate and weather data, which is pretty great. And I live in Colorado.
Yeah, and coding was never my strong suit. I don't know if you recall those days, but I was never very good at coding, but had some good friends that could help me out with that. So,
Mm.
so why don't you tell me? I know you recently started a new job at Demex. Why don't you tell us, a little bit about that, and how some of the difficulties you encountered. I'm sure you must have encountered starting a new job right before COVID hit.
Yeah, so I joined the Demex group back in February of, what was that, 2020 now, I want to say? Yeah, 2020, approximately 1 month before the world shut down with
Hmm.
COVID, as I know we are all very familiar with. So when I started, obviously I had no idea that the pandemic was going to come to the United States and everything was going to just go under lockdown, et cetera. So it was kind of a crazy time. I was always hired to be a remote worker there. However, as I guess part of my training period, I agreed to move to DC for 3 months so that I could work side by side with the CEO, who was basically in charge of all the analytics and the code base there. So I moved down to DC back in February of 2020, spent about a month there where I was training and learning all the processes at this new company. It was going well. We had talk about COVID coming onto the West Coast, but never thought it would really come to the East Coast. It did. And then about a month in, everything shut down. And I moved back to New Jersey, which is where I lived at the time, and basically never made it back to DC because none of us really thought that everything was going to shut down for as long as it did. So it definitely meant that I guess part of my onboarding and training process was slowed down because it's so much easier to, I think, learn new skills and learn a new code base and a new system when you're in the office with someone. And you have to really put an effort in when you are working remotely in order to get that same sort of experience when you're not in person. I think what was helpful for me, switching to fully remote after 1 month was that in my previous position where I was basically a contractor for RiskPulse doing a lot of analytic work for them, is that that position was remote. So I had 3.5, 4 years of experience working remote in some capacity. And I had really learned that in order to be successful as a remote worker, you had to go out of your way to reach out to people when you had problems and questions. You couldn't just, turn around in your chair and say, hey, so-and-so, like I'm stuck. Can you help me out with this problem? So I think that experience there really made it so that there was not this, I guess, invisible wall holding me back from asking questions when I needed help and me just sitting at my desk in my home alone, trying to figure something out. And I think that's, a very valuable part or important part of working remotely is being able to take the initiative to reach out and ask for help when you need it. But it definitely meant that a lot of my onboarding and training was kind of slowed down, but we've made it work. And now I'm 2.5 years in and feel like it's going very well.
Yeah, and I think it's an important point you mentioned about like that invisible wall, so to speak, where a lot of people without that experience in remote working, they might not really know how to ask questions.
Mhm.
If they're confused about something, and especially in coding, and I kind of speak from personal experience with coding, it's not the easiest thing to do. So, it certainly is something that people need to be aware of, that just because we're not in an office environment officially, you can kind of think of your home office, but um
Mhm.
that it's still okay to ask questions. It's something I think people forget a lot of times, especially working from home. You kind of get things get muddled a lot. um
Yeah.
so that kind of also answered my second question, but if there's anything you want to add, so obviously there's probably a lot more demands working fully remotely, um, than having maybe a half remote, half in person, something kind of that my brother does that these days. He's like half remote, half
Mhm.
office. Um, so what are some of the demands that come with working fully remote that don't necessarily come with having an office job?
Hmm. I mean, honestly, I feel like what's most important, I've noticed is most important is just being able to see people as well, which is one thing when you're fully remote, you can't see people. So I've been in environments where for some meetings or at different, I guess, iterations of this company, because we've grown a lot in the last 2.5 years being a startup, where like people just don't turn on their video and it's really hard to connect with them. So I have made it a point this whole time, especially being fully remote, to always have my video on, unless like I absolutely cannot and I'm doing something that I don't want to show. But honest, like, when I'm working, I'm trying to be presentable and show myself. And I feel like that has certainly helped this remote work. And we've actually talked about it at our company. Like we've had some Friday town hall meetings where they're less formal. And we're just kind of talking around with everyone in the company and trying to figure out, what's the best way that we can make this company most successful, being that a lot of us are remote. And we've certainly discussed, having videos on, being available, and also just getting rid of the stigma that, oh, I shouldn't call you. Um, because I'm not working in the same room as you. Maybe I'll just message you, but maybe you won't see the message as quickly as if I just call you and you have, the Teams notification, the ringtone going on, and then you answer the phone. So we've had to work a lot at this company of just getting comfortable with doing those sorts of things.
Yeah, and I think the point you made about always trying to be presentable. I think when you're at work, I think that's especially when remote. I think that's a good point because I see a lot of these. I'm sure you've seen them too. These videos of these people, not exactly. I'll just say not presentable.
Yeah,
I'm
yes,
sure you've
I've seen
seen.
that.
Yeah. So I think it's I think the main point I'm taking away here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that you kind of have to separate your work life and your home life essentially while you're working fully remote. And I get it, it's difficult to do that. It's the same place. It's kind of it's there's always going to be a little bit of overlap, but um that's something I think people, especially when they're working fully remote, that they need to kind of remember that yes, you're working from home, but it's also this is still your job, and you need to treat it like you were at the office. I think is
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's
And I know everyone has different living situations, but it certainly helps when you also have, a designated room that is your office.
mhm.
And that has also been very helpful for me, where, the room I'm sitting in now is my dedicated office space. And I only come in here when I'm working, and I really don't come into this room otherwise. And so, at the end of the workday, when I'm done, I'll leave the room, go back upstairs and, join the rest of the house, which is not my workspace. So that has also been very helpful for me. And I've been able, I guess, maybe lucky enough to have a spare room that I could use as an office.
Right. All right, so let's move on a little bit here. So what was the most difficult situation or decision you have faced in your career thus far? And you can count, your uh, career as, from when you were TA Rutgers all the way to current.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one thing that comes to mind, which was, I guess, a difficult situation, which led to a difficult decision later was while I was finishing up my PhD at Rutgers, that was during the time that I was also a contractor for Pulse, and I was doing a lot of analytic work there, and I very, very much enjoyed it. At a certain point, I was working 30, 40 hours a week. It was basically a full-time job as I was also finishing up the PhD. Anyway, what ended up being a difficult situation there was I ended up being let go from the company couple months before I finished up my PhD. And it was pretty devastating. I had never been let go before. I guess what made it feel a little bit nicer was that everyone assured me it was not because of my performance or my work there. There was a lot of stuff going up higher up in the company as the company they were getting ready to be acquired by another company. And so part of that process meant that they wanted their books to look tidier. And so they were just kind of getting rid of their contractors. But anyway, that was devastating for me. It was a difficult situation. And in my mind, I had always thought, oh, I'm going to continue working here once I have my PhD. And it was, just like, hey, I'm on the cusp of getting the PhD. And then all of a sudden, I no longer have a job. What am I going to do? So it was great. And it was hard. It was definitely a hard situation, but I kind of rebounded from it. I decided to, fully focus on my PhD, my dissertation, finish that up. And at the same time, I started talking to one of my colleagues there, who he was a great mentor, and he really helped me reach out to other people in the industry. And through that, I was able to get interviews, places, and it ended up being a great situation because I ended up getting two job offers at the same time. So it ended up being very great. And I ended up, eventually getting this job offer at the Demex group, doing something that I absolutely loved doing. And that was ultimately a great decision. I will say part of that, the difficult decision part there was, it was wonderful to have these two job offers. One was for the startup company, the Demex Group. The other job offer was for a very, I guess, well-known company that had been around for decades. And so I really had to kind of figure out which job to take. On one hand, the Demex Group, the job offer, it was more money upfront, but it was also a very risky proposition. I was coming into the company 1 month into when they started. So you have no idea, are they going to succeed? Are they going to fail? Most startups fail. The other job offer, it was a good offer and it offered me a path where I could really grow and develop my career. There was a clear trajectory for how I could grow with great benefits, but I didn't know what I really wanted to do. And in the end, I chose the Demex group because that job also offered me the ability to kind of be a lead in my space. And I have been able to kind of generate and create new products from nothing into something. So if I had worked for this other company, I'd probably just be doing these little itty bitty projects that no one really would see the end result or wouldn't really matter. But at the Demex group, I'm able to take something, like take nothing and then turn it into something and just have this pride of ownership, which was really wonderful.
Yeah, that sounds. Yeah, I mean that's always great to know that somebody else is using something you made.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll say, I think a lot of times when people are always faced with a decision, and it's going to sound a little cliche, but there's always there's the startup risky decision when it comes to jobs, and then there's the surefire thing. And I think when you're younger, and I still consider both me and you to be on the younger side. I think it's fine to take those risks, and I think especially to the people that end up watching this video, I think they should also take those risks if they're able to.
Yeah.
Because you never know. Because at the Demex group, there was more money, and since you're there at the startup, that odds are that means you're probably closer to being at the top of the company when and if it makes it big. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, since they've been going for 2 years, I think they're pretty stable by now. I should hope anyway. um,
At least it's still looking good for now.
yeah. So, you know,
Who knows what the
uh,
future holds?
but at the same time, still, I think if you can take that risky decision and you can make it work and it works out, then it's kind of the best thing I can think of is like the stock market. You take that risk on that penny stock and it goes up, then you're set. But if it doesn't, you're still young and you can go back and, maybe this time you don't take that risk and you can go maybe to the other company if they're still hiring or to a different company with a similar job. Those are when you're young, you have those options available to you.
Yeah,
And that's, I think that's,
completely agree there.
and as far as being let go, I know a lot of people it's odds are, the economy is always up and down,
Mhm.
and odds are somebody is going to get laid off at some point in their lives. Do you
Yeah.
have any specific advice for how you dealt with the disappointment of being let go?
That's a good question. I mean, I was definitely very sad for a while. It hurt. As I said, that had never happened to me before. Everyone I was working with liked the work I was doing. Um, but I guess maybe I let myself be sad for a few weeks, maybe a week or two, and then I realized, me being sad is not going to change anything. Nothing's going to come out of that. Like I need to figure out what my next step is. And so I guess it was good at that point. I was towards the very end of my PhD, but I still had something else I was doing. So then I was able to put all of my focus there, which I think in the end turned out to be a good thing. So I was able to finish my degree. But I guess the advice I have is just give yourself some time to, be upset, be sad. It sucks. Like there's no way around that. Um, but then use your network and reach out to people that and see if you can find something else. And I'm sure that like everyone has some sort of network. And I know it's hard in your early career, you don't know as many people, but you should just reach out. And I know it's not the easiest thing to do, but it almost always will help you in some way, shape, or form. So just, pick up the phone, write an email, reach out to someone and ask for help or advice. And that's basically what I did. And it ended up being a great thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a really really great point, and it even brings back that's something Steve Bennett on the very first knowledge exchange webinar we did. He said something very similar. When he was dealing with problems in his early career, that he reached out to people he knew and got advice from them, and took some of that advice. And I think it's important, especially for people of our generation. We're kind of prone to bottling things up, at least, maybe not as much as previous generations, but
Mhm.
and it's important that we can tell ourselves and have other people tell us, hey, it's okay to feel sad that you got let go, or whatever's making you sad in your life, whatever it happens to be. And you can reach out to people, and not everyone has a large group of people they can reach out to, and that's part of the reason that we're making this video today, that we have the webinar series as a whole and the knowledge exchange as a whole, is so that there's people that you can reach out to. And of course, there's
Yeah.
other resources besides that but specifically for academics, the knowledge exchange is there for that exact purpose, that someone, going back a couple of years, someone like yourself can reach out to, say, Dave Margolin on the knowledge exchange and say, hey, can you help me out? Give me some advice here. And I think that's something that a lot of people, miss out on and don't think to do. And,
Mhm.
it's something certainly I wish I had done earlier in my career as well, and, gotten some advice there, but, learn things the hard way sometimes.
Yeah. And you have to realize there's still so many years in the future. So even if you didn't do it in the past, like start today for anyone who's listening to this, someone and you never know who that someone might know. And that's just how all of these connections work.
Yeah, exactly. And I think back a couple years myself when I started working with Dave on the knowledge exchange and the forecast contest. I didn't know. I now, if I take a look at the network of people I know then versus now, it's night and day. It's
Yeah.
so you never know. And I joined the forecast contest essentially at the recommendation of another friend of mine. I'm sure you remember Phil from class.
Mhm.
He recommended it to me, and I was like, oh yeah, it seems interesting. I'll check it out. And here we are, 3 years later.
Yeah.
Um,
Doing something great. So that's what it is. All these little micro decisions you make along the way and things you decide to do leads you into like nice life decisions later.
yeah, and I think that's the key. thing. People always think it's like, oh, there's going to be this big moment in my life where I'm going to look back and say, that was the big ticket. And it's like, they think fireworks and all other grandiose things, but really it ends up always being like the tiny little things here and there that you don't really think much about at the time. And then it winds up, you look back and you're like, wow, that was such a small thing that wound up making such a huge difference.
Yeah, no, that's great. Exactly.
All right, so we're running just about out of time here. Do you have anything else you want to add about anything?
Um, I don't know if there's any other question you have, I'd be more than happy to answer it.
I don't have any other prepared questions, but I don't believe we have any. I'm not seeing any. So if there's no questions, of course, we'll forward any questions that happen to be posted on YouTube. If we get any questions there, we'll, of course, we'll send them your way. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Jenny, thanks so much for joining us. Hope our viewers found your talk as interesting and as inspiring as I did. And I really hope we can have you back soon to talk, well, I'd say about future periods of your career, but you have to have them first. And for the folks who would like to talk further with Jenny or perhaps solicit career advice, you can book a meeting with Jenny via theknowledgeexchange.com. And while you're on the Knowledge Exchange, you can look around. There's plenty of other volunteer givers and mentors who are available and would be happy to meet and share their knowledge. Finally, we will be posting all of our videos on our YouTube channel, the link to which is in your MailChimp. We send out weekly, and there will be a special MailChimp sent out tomorrow to also send you that link. You can also find more about the Knowledge Exchange on our Facebook and LinkedIn pages. And if you have any questions for today's moderator or speaker, you can find us at info@knowledgeexchange.com. Thanks everyone for watching.